It's not the life I ever thought I'd lead, but then again, life has a funny way of taking unexpected turns. 7 years ago, I was a young woman with dreams of having a family, a cozy home, and maybe a garden full of roses in the backyard. But here I am today, behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, miles away from any semblance of normalcy. When I first started driving, it was all about the money. I had just gotten out of a relationship that left me heartbroken and questioning everything. I thought a new career could help me start fresh, give me some space to heal. But what I didn't expect was the isolation that would come with it, the long hours alone, the endless stretches of highway that seemed to go on forever, the loneliness that would wrap around me like a thick fog. At first, it wasn't too bad. I had always been an independent person, and being alone for long stretches didn't bother me much. I'd blast my music, listen to podcasts, and fill the silence with the hum of the engine beneath me. But over time, the emptiness started to creep in. The days blended together, and my sense of self began to fade. Without the constant presence of friends and family, I felt disconnected, like I was drifting through life without any real anchor. Back home, I had Mark, my husband. We met when I was 18, fresh out of high school, full of hopes and dreams about what the future would hold. He was my first love, my first real relationship, and I thought we were inseparable. We had the kind of love story that felt like it came out of a movie. We laughed together, cried together, built a life together. We had a modest apartment, but it was ours. It was enough. We got married a few years after that, and soon after, I had my son, Luke. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. The truth is, I never saw it coming. Life was supposed to follow a script: get married, have kids, build a career, and retire happy. But as I spent more and more time away from home, the cracks in our relationship started to show. It wasn't even about anything big. There were no dramatic fights, no infidelity, no huge betrayals. It was just a slow, steady erosion of what we had. Mark didn't really understand what it was like for me out on the road. He didn't get how lonely it was, how the days felt like they stretched on forever without a single human voice to break the silence. And I didn't understand how hard it was for him either. He had his job, his life at home, and it was easier for him to fill the gaps. For me, though, there was nothing but the endless miles of road and the occasional text or phone call. We used to talk every night, but eventually, even those conversations started to feel forced, like we were just going through the motions, both of us waiting for something to change that never would. When I wasn't working, I tried to fill the void. I talked to other truck drivers on the road, made a few friends in different cities, but it was all temporary. We'd chat, grab a meal together, but nothing ever lasted. It wasn't the kind of connection that made me feel whole. And that's when I realized something was missing. I had the job, the freedom, the independence. But I was alone. I was so alone, and I didn't know how to fix it. One evening, I found myself parked at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere, just outside of Albuquerque. I had finished my route for the day and was sitting in the cab, staring out at the vast desert stretching in front of me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty landscape. There was something about the stillness that felt almost surreal. It was beautiful in a way, but also haunting. The thought of how much time I'd spend in places like this, away from everything I once knew, weighed heavily on me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mark's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hey, Sarah. How's the road?" His voice sounded tired, distant, like he was already halfway asleep. "Good. Just finished up for the day. I'm at a truck stop, thought I'd check in." "Yeah, I figured. Been busy here. Luke's got a soccer game this weekend. You gonna make it?" The mention of Luke's game brought a pang of guilt to my chest. I hated missing his games, but lately, it felt like I was missing more and more of his life. "I'll try." I should be back Friday night, I said, even though I knew that sometimes plans on the road didn't go as expected. All right. Talk to you later. And just like that, the conversation ended. No, I love you, no real connection. Just a quick exchange of words before hanging up. It wasn't the first time it had happened, and I was starting to wonder if it would be the last. I stared at my phone for a moment, wondering if it was time to confront the reality of what had been happening between us. Mark and I were growing apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. But as I sat there, looking out at the desert, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe we were both just lost in our own worlds, unable to find our way back to each other. The night felt long, much longer than the usual hours of darkness that enveloped the road. I was used to the solitude by now, but tonight, the silence seemed oppressive. I switched off the engine and stepped out of the truck, feeling the cool desert air hit my face. I stood there for a while, looking at the stars above, trying to find some comfort in their distant, timeless presence. They didn't know anything about me or my problems, but somehow, just looking at them made the weight of my thoughts feel a little lighter. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had gotten here. 7 years on the road, and I had never felt more isolated in my life. I missed Mark. I missed Luke. I missed the way things used to be, when we were a family, when we were all so close. But now, it felt like I was drifting farther and farther away from them. My heart ached at the thought of it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes. I thought about calling my mother, or maybe my sister, but the truth was, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was tired of the fake smiles, the empty conversations. I didn't want to explain why I was sad or why I couldn't fix things with Mark. I just wanted to escape it all, even if only for a moment. I climbed back into the truck and pulled out my laptop, hoping a movie or a show could take my mind off things. But as I flicked through the options, none of them seemed appealing. Instead, I found myself scrolling through social media, just mindlessly browsing, hoping to find something to distract me. And then I saw it. A post from an old friend. Her name was Emily, and we had been close in high school. She had gotten married young, had kids right away, and was living a life that seemed so different from mine. Her post was a picture of her family at a park, all smiles, everyone looking so happy. It was the kind of photo that made you feel like everything in the world was just as it should be. The kind of life I had once dreamed of, before it all slipped away. I stared at the photo for a long time, feeling a mix of envy and sadness. I remembered the days when I used to talk to Emily about our futures, how we both had similar dreams back then. I remembered how we had promised to always stay in touch, no matter where life took us. But life, as it often does, had pulled us in different directions. She had found her happiness, her place in the world, while I was still searching for mine. It wasn't just Emily's life that made me feel this way, it was everything. My job, my marriage, my relationship with Luke, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit anymore. And I didn't know how to change that. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my seat, staring out the windshield, watching as the night stretched out before me. For a brief moment, I considered quitting, walking away from the truck, from everything that had led me to this place. Maybe I could go back home and try to fix things with Mark. Maybe I could finally get my life back on track. But the thought felt impossible. The road had become a part of me. I had spent too many years chasing after something I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore. A knock on the side of the truck door startled me from my thoughts. I glanced to my right, where a man stood, his face partially illuminated by the street lamp overhead. He was a truck driver, like me, but I didn't recognize him. He had a friendly smile, one of those smiles that seemed to offer a bit of warmth in a world that often felt cold. "Hey there," he said, giving a small wave. "Mind if I sit with you for a minute?" I hesitated. There was something about this stranger that felt safe. It had been so long since I'd had a real conversation with anyone. but I wasn't in the mood to chat, not really. Still, something in his tone made me lower the window. "I guess," I said, a little too curtly, but he didn't seem to mind. He pulled up a chair and sat across from the truck, facing me. We didn't speak right away, just sat there in silence, the sound of the wind blowing gently through the desert filling the space between us. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "You know, sometimes it helps to talk. Doesn't matter what about. I find that just saying it out loud helps clear the mind." I let out a soft laugh. It felt odd to hear someone talk about opening up like that. In my world, truck drivers didn't have heart-to-hearts at rest stops. They were too busy, too focused on the next haul, the next stop. But there was something in his voice, something real, and for some reason, I felt like I could trust him. "I don't know if it would help," I said, shaking my head. "I'm just lost, I guess." He nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "I get it. We all go through it. This life. It makes you feel like you're running in circles sometimes. And you start wondering if the road even leads anywhere." I looked at him, surprised at how much he seemed to understand, but at the same time, I felt a little ashamed for sharing so much with a stranger. "You're probably right," I said quietly. "I've been on this road for so long that I don't even know who I am anymore. I used to have everything, my family, my life, my dreams. But now, I don't know. It all feels so distant." He looked at me thoughtfully. "It's tough, but you know what? Sometimes the hardest part is just admitting that things aren't okay. Once you do that, you can start thinking about what comes next. It's not easy, and it won't happen overnight. But it's a start." I felt a lump form in my throat, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't try to hold back the tears. They came slowly at first, but then all at once, a flood of emotion I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. The pain, the loneliness, the guilt, it all came pouring out, and for the first time, I didn't try to stop it. The man didn't say anything more. He just sat there with me, letting me cry, offering me a quiet space to feel everything I had been bottling up for so long. After what felt like an eternity, I wiped my eyes and took a shaky breath. I had no answers, no solutions, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. "Thanks," I said, my voice hoarse. I didn't expect any of this." He smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me. We're all in this together, even if it doesn't always feel that way." I nodded, and for a moment, I just let myself be. As he stood to leave, he gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself, okay? You've got a long road ahead, but you're not the only one on it." And with that, he walked away, disappearing into the night as quietly as he had come. I sat there for a while longer, processing everything that had happened. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could change. Maybe I wasn't as lost as I thought. Maybe there was a way to find my way back home, to find my way back to the people and the life I had left behind. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to keep running anymore. The road might still be long, but I wasn't going to walk it alone. As the night wore on, I sat there, staring out into the vast emptiness of the desert, feeling the weight of the conversation I just had. The wind had picked up a bit, making the quiet hum of the truck's engine almost comforting in the stillness. I could feel the tears still burning on my cheeks, but they no longer felt like an overwhelming flood. Instead, they felt like a release, a clearing of the fog that had clouded my mind for far too long. I thought about what the stranger had said. "You're not the only one on it." It was simple, yet profound. It had been so long since I had allowed myself to believe that. I had spent the past several years feeling like I was isolated on this endless highway, as though the road was mine to travel alone. But the truth was, everyone was fighting their battles, whether it was family, work, or just the grind of life itself. And maybe I wasn't as far from home as I thought. I didn't know what the next step would be, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was something beyond the horizon, something waiting for me if I had the courage to take the first step. I had spent so much time running from my problems, pretending they would disappear if I just kept moving. But the reality was, I couldn't outrun everything forever. The past had a way of catching up to you, no matter how fast you went. As I started the engine again, the hum of the truck was no longer just a sound. It felt like a companion, guiding me forward. I wasn't sure if I was heading back to Mark or to something entirely new, but either way, I knew that I had to face what lay ahead. I couldn't keep avoiding the things I had left behind. The road ahead stretched out in front of me like an open possibility. There would be hard moments. There would be more nights like this one, where the weight of it all seemed unbearable. But there would also be brighter mornings, moments of clarity, and the potential to rebuild the things that mattered most to me. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs as I turned the truck onto the highway. The lights of the distant town flickered on the horizon, and I knew that, wherever I was headed, it was a new beginning. I wasn't running anymore.